And so question 7a, we want to create a ratio of sugar to flour. So the way that we would do this in math is we would first generally use a colon, right? So we're trying to say sugar colon flour. Now, what we generally do after we kind of get that like ratio colon relationship is we then start to think about this as a fraction. So we would say sugar divided by flour. Now, if we want to create a ratio here, what we need to do is take the amount of sugar that we're using and the amount of flour that we're using, and then kind of create this type of relationship. So if I have 1/3 of a cup to 1/2 of a cup of flour, I should probably be a little sugar and flour. This means I'm going to actually do this over here. So this means that we could say I have 1/2 a cup of sugar divided by 1/3 a cup of flour. Right, so what we need to do is take one fraction and divide it by another. All right, so you may remember how to divide fractions, right? So, kind of giving elementary school a little bit. Remember to divide a fraction by another fraction, 1/2 divided by 1/3. A lot of times we use like the keep, change, flip kind of saying. We keep this first fraction the same, we change this multiplication to division, and then we flip this second fraction, aka we create this reciprocal, right? So keep, change, flip. Now, once we're trying to multiply fractions, all we need to do is multiply the numerators together. 1 times 3 gives me 3. 2 times 1 gives me 2. So this would be the ratio of sugar to flour. We're saying that we're taking 3 cups of sugar for every 2 cups of flour. And so that's one way to attack this question. Another way, if we really want to be super precise, if we want to kind of do what's called a unit ratio, right? So once I know that it's 3 cups of sugar to 2 cups of flour, well, sometimes we don't want to think 3 cups, right? Because you don't actually want to use 3 cups of flour. So if I wanted to have 1 cup of sugar, I would have to divide this by 3. Well, if I divided that by 3, I would have to divide this by 3. So we can say 1 cup of sugar for every 2/3 a cup of flour. So another perfectly fine way to write that ratio. Both the blue and the red equivalent to one another. For question B, we want to know how much of each ingredient to make 2 dozen cookies. So we know that right now we're making 3 dozen cookies with this amount. So again, a couple of ways that we could attack this. We could pretend that we don't know anything from part A. So we know that 1/3 a cup of sugar we can use to make 3 dozen cookies. And so if we want to make 2 dozen cookies, here's where the proportion aspect of it comes in. We have some unknown amount of sugar, and we want to make 2 dozen cookies. So if I could write this as a fraction, 1/3 a cup of sugar for every 3 dozen cookies, right? So cup, I'll just say S for sugar, 3 dozen cookies. I could write this as some sort of proportion as well. I have some unknown number of cups of sugar, but I only want to make 2 dozen cookies. So what we could do at this point is we could set these two proportions equal to one another and solve for that unknown cup of sugar. We could say 1/3 over 3 is equal to, I'll just use an x for my cups of sugar over 2. So now we can do a couple of things. We could cross multiply, we could kind of solve in some fancy ways, but probably in school you would just cross multiply. So 1/3 times 2 is going to be 2/3. If we do 3 times x, we're going to get 3x. We want to solve for x, so we would divide this side by 3. So we would have to divide this side by 3 as well. And so we're going to get 2 over 3 times 3, which is 2/9 equals x. Just make sure we remember what we were looking for. This x represented cups of sugar. So to make 2 dozen cookies, we'd have to use 2/9 a cup of sugar. So I'll do kind of like the second one a little bit faster, right? If we have half a cup of flour, over here. So if we have half a cup of flour for 3 dozen cookies, and we have some unknown amount for 2 dozen, we can set up the same sort of relationship. We can have a half over 3 is equal to my unknown. I'll use a different value like y over 2. When we cross multiply, a little bit nicer because 1/2 times 2, a half of 2 is 1. 3 times y is 3y. Divide this side by 3, divide this side by 3, and we're left with y equals 1/3 a cup of flour. And so that one a little bit extra, right? Because have to do some math on your math packet. Crazy how that works sometimes. Yeah, but those would be our two answers.